record button, please. Thank you. Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar Wednesday. My name is Kirsty Stephen. I'm an assistive technology and additional support needs teacher here at Call Scotland. I'm delighted to be joined today by Sophie Stevenson from Crick software, particularly as Sophie is feeling a little bit under the weather today. So we're very grateful that you're here. Thank you, Sophie.
Oh, no problem.
Some of you might know Sophie. She is Crick Software's education consultant for Scotland. Prior to joining Crick, Sophie was a primary school teacher who worked across local authorities throughout Scotland in both mainstream classes and in a support for learning role as well. So today's session on supporting writing with the Clicker apps is going to be recorded. Craig's hit the record button for us, which is great, so thanks Craig. And the recording link will follow over the next week via email. We've got folk joining us from all around the world today, so that's great, or people catching up as well, so that's fabulous. Please ensure that your mics remain muted throughout the presentation today, and if you don't want to be in the recording, then please turn your camera off. The webinar will run for 20 minutes and then we'll have time for question and answer session, which Sophie is going to do at the end. And then but if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Sophie. Thanks, Sophie.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. As you can hear, I have got a pretty bad chest infection. So to save you all from listening to me fighting for my life, I've got a pre-recorded session for today, and I've edited out all of my coughing fits. If you get any questions throughout the session, add them into the chat and I'll be able to answer them for you all at the end. So I'm just going to get started now.
Sophie dropped off.
Yes, I think we've lost Sophie. Oh, he's back again.
Oh. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know why this isn't playing. I'm just going to close my media player and then try it again.
Yeah,
okay.
No worries.
I'll edit the recording, so give it a fresh start once Sophie gets going.
It's clearly a popular topic because we've got lots of people registered for today. So
I'm a primary school teacher. Thank you for joining me for today. This session will be useful if you already have Clicker and if you're interested in finding out ways that it can be used in your school, or if you are interested in getting Clicker for your school and would like to find out more. I'm going to take you through the 3 Clicker apps, which are Clicker Talk, Clicker Books and Clicker Writer, and how they can be used to plan, execute and assess a lesson while getting it right for all of your learners with Clicker's tailored support tools. My email address is on screen, and throughout the session a link to book in a consultation with me will be shared, where you'll be able to have a one-on-one conversation with me about your school's specific needs and how Clicker can be used to support them. I won't be able to answer questions throughout the session, but I have allocated some time at the end to go through them, so please add them to the chat throughout. So in my final year of working in schools, I was working out with class alongside the school's learning support teacher in a post-COVID lockdown world. I was mainly initially conducting assessments throughout the school, but for the most part I actually ended up team teaching with the primary 6 teacher who had a very challenging class. The challenge came from a group of boys who had an extremely diverse range of needs, and I don't need to paint too vivid a picture of just how that manifested and impacted the learning going on not only for themselves, but the learning going on around about them. So I actually love working with these types of pupils, as I personally feel that's where you can make the really big impact. So I threw myself into learning about the barriers that they had and worked on ways that we could overcome them. Now, unfortunately, at that point, I had never even heard of Clicker, so it wasn't part of my learning plan for these pupils at the time. But today, I'm going to outline a description of the pupils, what their barriers were to learning, and how I would now use Clicker if I was in the same scenario. So as we progress through today's session, I want you to listen to the pupils' descriptions and determine if these barriers mirror some of the issues that your current learners have, and have a think about ways in which Clicker could have impacted your learners in the past, and ways you can now use it to support your learners in the future. So the focus of this lesson is going to be the moon landing, and we're going to make use of a Clicker book for the teaching input. So I'll just open up Clicker books, and we're going to make use of learning grids to see if there are any pre-made resources that we can make use of. So I'm going to head into learning grids. We know that the moon landing is a historical event and it's a significant event, so we'll go to the moon landing, and we've got 3 different options to choose from, and we are going to make use of the read a book for our teaching input. So as a class, we can work through this and engage with each page. We can either take turns having it, reading it aloud, or we can make use of the read aloud feature.
A month after the Soviet space flight.
Now that's really useful for pupils during the execution of the lesson. If they need some information, reconsolidated, they don't need to have you access that for them. They'll be able to access it on their own devices and have it read aloud to them so that they're able to access all of that information. So we've done our teaching input, and I have used my knowledge of the pupils to plan out the task for this lesson. And the first pupil that we are going to focus on is pupil K. So here is our description of pupil K. Now, pupil K comes from a very challenging home life, and as a result of that, he is very guarded, and it's very difficult to build that initial relationship with him. Verbally, he is willing to express himself, he's willing to talk about and share what his learning was, and he can do that very well, but to get him actually started initiating with any tasks, regardless of the subject area, was very, very difficult. And what I sort of assessed from this was eventually, was he had a fear of failing? So if he didn't start the task, he couldn't fail with the task, so he just didn't start it. His flight response was very, very easily triggered, so if you pushed him too hard on anything, he would be perfectly happy to walk out of class or become destructive as an avoidance tactic, but was more than happy to sit and listen and engage during the teaching input and verbally share what he'd learned in that teaching input, but just getting that task started was a real challenge for pupil K. So for this lesson, to gather evidence of learning from pupil K, I would make use of Clicker Talk. So here we have a Clicker Talk set about the moon landing. Now, this was already a pre-made resource that I've just been able to take straight from Learning Grids. I've not had to do anything to create this resource. And you'll notice that the icons here match the icons that are on the Clicker book that we've just engaged with. And the task is for the pupils to make a sound recording of what happened on the page of that Clicker book. So pupil K is able to flick between the apps and execute this task completely independently. Now, this is one of the things that I loved about teaching, because to the layman, this is just a simple record what you know activity. But to us, we know that they have just processed that information in written form, verbal, and now oral form. And you, most importantly, have got that evidence of learning, which I know I would have been able to easily convince pupil K to do, and he's, you know, more than keen, more than happy to verbally engage with learning, and I've got that evidence of learning from that pupil. Now, depending on external factors of that day, you know, aka whatever had been going on at home, there would have been some lessons where that is enough of an achievement from pupil K. But there will be some lessons where he would be willing to be pushed more, and he's off of the starting block because of clicker talk. But before I explain how I would do that, I would like to introduce you to pupil A. So here is our description of pupil A. Now, pupil A is awaiting ADHD and dyslexia diagnosis. They can be motivated to start tasks, but they give up very easily and then become distracting towards others. And, you know, we'll usually use the, oh, I was waiting for help, as his excuse. If he has a staff member allocated to him to be a scribe, he will copy and he will complete the task, but only if this takes place out with the classroom, as he has expressed that he finds this embarrassing. So if out with classroom scribing is not available, he will act out, and will sometimes walk out of the class as well. He is able to comprehend learning, but due to a limited and short attention span, this can sometimes be limited as well. So he needs the information repeated to him quite a few times. So Clicker is perfect for pupil A, as it acts as a scribe and a reader without the restricting demands on a staff member, and it removes the element of embarrassment for the pupil, as well as introduces that element of independence for the pupil as well. For pupil A, some of our basic word processor tools that they could make use of would be the predictor feature, which features above the keyboard as they are constructing their words and predicts what it is you're trying to say. And they can also make use of the read aloud feature to help narrow down their choices. And they've also got that fallback of our words or spell check for any issues that they have made to help support them rectify those issues. An even better feature for pupil A is our clicker sets, which can be found here. And we've got sentence sets, connect sets, and word banks as well. So for this lesson, we would be making use of our clicker sets, and we would also be making use of them for pupil K as well. So let's head to Learning Grids and see what resources already exist for me, the teacher, to cut down on my workload, and then I'll show you the settings that we can use to tailor the learning experience to pupil A's specific requirements. So we'll head to history, significant events, the moon landing, and we see we've got a sentence set, a connect set, a clicker board, and some word banks already created for us. So we are going to go with a sentence set for pupil A, and sentence sets support writers build sentences word by word. They're great for developing proper use of punctuation, building decoding skills, and applying new topic vocabulary. But most importantly for pupil A, once they are trained in using this, they can do this completely independently without any pupils around about them being made aware of what supports they're using, and a staff member's time isn't needed to oversee this. So you'll notice that the icons here correlate with the clicker book that we engaged with at the start of the lesson, and the task is for the pupil to arrange these words into a coherent sentence. Now, there's different settings that we can play around with for the pupil's needs. For example, right now the sentence is modelled that I can look at it, but I'm not able to construct the sentence while that is visible. I can also have that read aloud back to me so I can hear it, but again, I'm not able to click those words into the correct order. Now, due to pupil A's attention span, I think at the moment this would throw him, and he would need to have that sentence visible to him as he constructed that sentence. So I can go into my settings and I can change it to view and copy, and now it's present there while I'm constructing the sentence, and
President Kennedy wanted to land a person on the moon.
I can have it read aloud for me as well. Now I can also play around with the settings here as to how I want these words to be presented, and I can go in and have it in alphabetical order, random order, sentence order, or guided order. Now guided order is really useful for when you're initially introducing pupils to Clicker, because they can only put it in the right order and they can't click any other word and then add in their punctuation.
President Kennedy wanted to land a person on the moon.
But I think for pupil A, they can have it as random order, so there is an element of challenge there, but they've got that view and copy option available to them. Now, once he's received his dyslexia diagnosis, if it's been confirmed that pupil A would make use of coloured overlays, I'm able to change the colour of these boxes, and I'm able to change the colour of the background of the screen to make viewing this a lot easier for him as well. So it's really tailoring the experience to that pupil's specific needs. Pupil A had completed these sentences, just like he would do with the scribe. I would have him develop handwriting skills, and I would have him write the sentences out in his jotter. And then, if he wanted to, he could read the sentences back into a Clicker talk set. So pupil A's learning experience would have gone from being embarrassed to complete work in the classroom around his peers because of supports he needs to be able to learn, to being able to independently construct sentences, write those sentences out, and then read those sentences back to himself. Pupil K at this point would be able to complete the sentence without any model, as he could listen back to his talk set, and because he'd been supported to up until that point, the element of the fear of failure would be removed, as he, in his mind, is simply just clicking on the words in the right order. And once he'd completed these sentence sets, I would have him also work on his handwriting skills and simply copy these sentences into his jotter that have already been constructed by him, but that failure feeling is not going to be there because it's not the same as looking at a vast blank page and no idea what to fill it with. And once pupil K had developed in confidence, I would move him on to working on a Connect set, which is a scaffolded writing tool that he is still being heavily supported to construct those sentences, where he's been challenged a bit more, but there's still no fear of failing because he has access to all of those same supports. So now for pupil K, we not only have evidence of learning, but there is also that scope for progression once he has gained in some confidence. So moving on to pupil S. Pupil S has got an ADHD diagnosis, but once engaged in a task, he would hyper-focus and complete it quite quickly. He got bored easily and frustrated when he wasn't being challenged. And when he was frustrated, he would become quite distracting to others. And he didn't respond well in any attempt at correcting his behaviours. He didn't respond well to criticism, and he would find it quite disheartening. So it would be a challenge providing him feedback in any form other than verbal, as he was able to listen more to the tone and respond to the tone. So pupil S was a very intelligent boy, and if he wasn't being challenged, I would lose him for the rest of the day. He wouldn't respond well to sentence sets or Connect sets because they wouldn't be challenging for him. He would be more of a word bank pupil, where he is able to independently construct sentences, but he's being supported by being given access to topic-specific vocabulary. He's able to turn on or off the predictor and make use of the readback feature to help him narrow down his choice. And he's also got access to the spell check to rectify any of the errors he's maybe made independently. The issue with that is in an assessment point of view. So by looking at his work, I don't know what tools he has used in completing this work. And that is unfortunately the case when it comes to using any word processors within class to complete an article of work. But with Clicker, I could open the work that pupil S had completed on their Clicker app on my laptop, and I would be able to have a look at their work in the Clicker Analytics feature. So I have opened up the desktop version of Clicker on my desktop. I have then gone into the area that I've asked the pupil to save their work to, and this is the work that they created on their own device. I can see that I've got a finished article of work. I can see that it very well may fulfil the success criteria, but I cannot tell anything about the journey that the pupil went on to get to this finished article of work. But when I open up Analytics, Pupil S's work is now highlighted in various colours depending on the supports that they made use of throughout that lesson. I can even have a look and see if, when they were using the word bank, if they needed it to be read aloud to them to narrow down their choice. I can see with the predictor tool what their initial attempt was, and again if they used the speech feedback to help support them. And importantly, I can see if any of this work was copied and pasted from another source. But I can see that Pupil S has completed all of this work independently. Now, that means Pupil S has got this view that they have been enabled to generate independently. It doesn't need to be subjected to the red pen, doesn't need to be corrected because they've already fixed all of their errors. And I have got a view that can be used to feed my next steps. I've got the option to add some teacher notes for me to personally be able to see, and I've also got the option to print this information off for my teacher folder. But we've already established that Pupil S doesn't respond very well to written feedback. So how would I go about giving Pupil S feedback that he's going to respond well to, that is going to be beneficial for him? Now, verbal feedback was always my favourite form of delivering feedback, but it is impossible to give verbal feedback to all of your pupils in a single day. So I would make use of, in this instance, the voice recorder. I would be able to deliver my feedback to Pupil S. They're able to pick up on my tone, and that way it's useful feedback for them to work on in the future. In terms of next steps for this pupil, looking at the analytics, I can see that they have made quite a high use of the predictor. Looking at the typed letters, and the fact that they've not needed speech feedback, I can kind of use my professional opinion to determine they perhaps don't need access to the predictor in future. So I can either say that to them in my feedback to try and limit their use of the predictor feature, or I personally can go into their device and turn off access to the predictor feature for future articles of work. But you can see how this just completely transforms delivering that feedback to the pupil and also informs my next steps in terms of planning. So finally, I want to talk about pupil O. Now, pupil O has a diagnosis of Tourette's, which presents when he is stressed and anxious or is put on the spot to speak. So academically, he can complete work independently and very quickly, but for the most part, he has no interest in actually doing that, and he is quite difficult to engage or motivate. He doesn't respond to positive reinforcement. He doesn't like working with an adult or with his peers, and he can quite easily pass a lesson without contributing at all or without doing anything. He is quite keen to impress his mum though, and he does like to show her whatever work he does, and he is quite a keen artist, so he always participates in art-based lessons, and he likes creative writing. So this can sometimes be used as an incentive for him to participate. So for pupil O, immediately we know that the approach that we took for pupil K of starting with a talk set is not going to work. It never is a one size fits all. If I was to start pupil O with a talk set, it would probably trigger some tics for him. He would feel stressed. He would feel very, very much put on the spot. However, I do know that if he has an opportunity to be creative, he will engage. But this is a lesson about the moon landing, and it's about the facts of the moon landing. So for me to get pupil O engaged, I've got a couple of options. And number one would be I could have him create his own clicker book about the moon landing. So similar to pupil S, he would be able to complete all of his content independently with use of a word bank, plan out his book, and then he can illustrate each page himself on a bit of paper, take pictures of his illustrations, and add it into his clicker book. And I know he would respond really well to that as a suggestion. Additionally, we could also have a creative writing finished first activity of writing a story. Now, as a class, we could have collaborated together to create a stimulus of an alien that perhaps Neil Armstrong has come across on the moon. And we could have all collaborated together to create this clicker board as a stimulus. Now, pupil O could then have this turned into a word bank, and it would sit at the bottom of his page as he completed that body of work. So as you can see, it is really tailoring that learning to engage pupil O and get him excited about participating. So it is adding extra elements that are really going to interest him, but he's still completing the work that everyone else in the class is completing. Now, with a Clicker Unlimited subscription, it comes with access to Clicker at home for staff and pupils. So if I still felt that pupil O was resisting a little bit in terms of engaging with this activity, if I was to say, you'll be able to show your mum this, it definitely would be the key for him to engage in that task. So rather than me having to take a picture of his work and emailing it to his mum or sending home his jotter and hoping it gets returned the next day or trying to catch her at the end of the day, he is just simply able to go home, tell his mum about the work that he completed in school, and they're both going to be able to go on and have a look at it together on their at-home device. Now, as I said at the start of the session, I didn't have access to Clicker when I had this class and when I was working with this group of boys. So it is difficult to say definitively that it would have improved the behaviours and the learning outcomes in that class. So I thought it'd be great to have a look at a success story that I've recently gathered from a school in North Lanarkshire. I had had a consultation with this school and discussed their needs, and they had decided to go with an unlimited subscription for the school. I reached out a few months later to ask if I could come to the school and see it in action, and while I was there, a staff member told me about her pupil Chloe and showed me some of the work before and after having access to Clicker. Chloe was experiencing a lot of the same frustrations as the boys we've discussed today, and those frustrations were manifesting in some of the same ways. It was a real challenge to get her started with tasks. She would resort to
Sophie,
some
I'm wondering,
disruptive
could we just pause
distraction
it there?
tactics. Yes,
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just conscious of the time.
No, that's fine, no problem.
And we will be sending this out as, you know, the full thing as a recording. So we'll ensure that your recording is sent alongside ours. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Thank
no
you.
problem.
I just wanted to quickly jump over to a couple of questions. So somebody had asked if this was the Clicker 8 or a later version that you'd shared. So Craig and I were pretty sure we were on the latest version. Do you still call it Clicker 8?
So it's now just, we
Clicker.
mainly do refer to it as Clicker because
Yeah,
previous versions have been Clicker 6, Clicker 7, and they have been perpetual ownership, but you'll only, once there's any updates or any new releases, you then need to get the latest version of it.
Yeah.
So now that it's Clicker 8 and it's a subscription service, any updates or any new apps that are released, if you've got a subscription, you will get access to it. So it's always just going to be known as Clicker.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Great, thank you. And then someone else had asked if the apps were included in the whole site license, to which I've said yes, and I've just popped a copy of the pricing page from the website into the chat there.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's correct.
Right, one last question here. Is it possible to set up lessons for a group using an iPad, or do they need to be set up using a laptop? And Miss Bays has just said, for example, if she wanted to create other words in a word bank, could she set them up from her iPad for the whole group to see?
Yeah, so it would depend on how the school shares or saves their files.
Yeah.
But say for example you've got 3 different spelling groups, the blue group and the yellow group and the green group. If you wanted to set that work for those particular groups, you could save those files titled the blue, the red and the yellow, and those pupils would then be able to access it. And very similar to a Word document, if they wanted to save it as their own different version so it doesn't change the main version, it can be generated on an iPad. It doesn't necessarily need to be the desktop version.
Great. Okay, I've actually, just if anyone else has got any questions, please pop them into the chat. I wanted to ask you about the analytics. Is that new that they're available in the app?
So no, that was on the desktop version
That
as I
was the
showed.
desktop.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
So you can only access analytics via the desktop version,
Right.
which is why we do always say that the teacher or the staff member should have ideally should have a desktop version. Yeah.
Right, okay. And Scottish Voices.
Yes, so we do have Scottish Voices generated at the moment. We've got Rona that is available, but that's an adult voice. We have got the children's Scottish Voices. We are just waiting for them to be able to be made available for all of the different users. But yeah, they are there. They are recorded. We're just waiting for them to be there. So
waiting to be added on. Oh, that'll be great. That'll make a real difference for some.
absolutely, yeah,
great.
definitely.
Great. Well, anyone else got anything they'd like to ask Sophie while she's here? I think that's been really useful.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and we very much appreciate you coming along this afternoon, especially when you're not feeling.
No, not at all, not at all. Thank you very much for having me.
I think it's been useful. The recordings will be sent via email.
Perfect.